Psychic, medium, researcher, and academic Dr. Julia Assante is my guest. She is the author of a book that explores the afterlife and our fears about death. It is called The Last Frontier. She says if you are willing, you can start communicating with loved ones who have passed. Anyone can do this.
That's right. We all have these abilities. We're all doing it anyway, in some way or another. I mean, what is prayer about? How many of us have not called on a family member for help?
Guardian angel.
Yeah, whatever. And, you know, it's basically a telepathic process after death communication, and everyone is certainly telepathic. We could not have a culture or a civilization without telepathy. A mother couldn't talk to her infant.
But there's fear about that, as you know, like it's the dark arts, we should not connect with the dead.
This is historical. This happened in 7th century BC under the reforms of King Josiah when necromancy was outlawed on pain of death by stoning. And that has to do with the notion that the people who are dead are divine. And as the cult of Yahweh was forming at that time, no other divinity was allowed within that cult.
And yet brilliant people in history have believed in this. The Churchills, Lincoln, General George Patton.
Oh, yes. He not only believed, he had constant conversations with his father in army tents about strategy. And that's when we can tap into it, the resources are beyond belief.
What about senses when you die, when you're on the other side? Do you smell? Do you?
Well, most of it is visual. Certainly, the senses mix. There's this thing called synesthesia. They mix so that you have, and we have that in our own bodies, but we don't recognize it sharply enough. But for instance, the sense of smell could actually be mixed with a color or even a sound. And on the other side, people actually work in these types of media, and different perceptual senses, incredibly enhanced vision, incredibly enhanced hearing, and mobilities, as I said before. So what that actually looks like is very hard for us to translate.
When does a soul decide to incarnate or not incarnate or come back? Or do you believe in that?
Yeah, there's definitely reincarnation, but it's not sequential. You think of it as a radio. You have one radio, and there's all these different stations, right, that are all sending out shows.
Right.
Right? That's what incarnations are. It's simultaneous. It's all at once. There's no time in this dimension, this inner dimension. Your incarnations exist now. In fact, you can even have some who are in body in the same place and time that you're in.
I had a life reading once, and you don't know whether to believe it or not believe it.
Right.
And he told me that I was once a town crier in London, England, which kind of makes sense because I'm a bit yappy, and that I was also an artist in France, a female artist. And my brothers were also artists, and I didn't get any attention because they only paid attention to the boys, to the men.
Sure.
Hence the feminist in me, I suspect.
Right.
But, you know, do you believe that or not believe that, or is it too
this
new
is what
agey for
This
you?
is what I can tell you. That if you if you do a therapy, in past life therapy, and if the problem is anchored in a past life, once you work that past life, the problem is usually gone. There is also way too much documentation on memory and validation of that memory. It's all over the place. In fact, with children, the works of Ian Stevenson, University of Virginia, the best of all investigators of reincarnation, he found that children who reincarnated quickly had a 90-95% accuracy in their memories because their parents were still alive. The parents from the previous life were still alive.
Okay.
So it could all be verified. So you have somebody's shot in the chest. There's a birthmark. There's an exit wound on the back. But this is only when the interim period between one life and the next is short. The memory is extraordinary.
Really?
Yeah.
Because is there anything more tragic for a parent than to lose a child?
Nothing. No, I don't think
Nothing. So when you talk to parents who have lost children and want to connect with children?
That, to me, is some of the most important work that I'm doing. And what I try to do in all cases is not to do the work for them, but to get them to do it so that they can make contact themselves. That to me is the most important thing. They have that. They can take that home. They can have a living relationship with their departed children. And it's very, very powerful when it happens. And when they make that contact, it's like an explosion, a shaking and a crying. And once they know where that reference point is inside themselves, they can return to it and have a living relationship with their children. Now the thing is that if it's a very young child or an infant, the child may show up much older. People on the other side tend to go back into their maximum state, at the absolute height of their potential. So an infant could look maybe 20 years of age, which can disturb a parent. So the parent may see the infant, but it'll talk like somebody who's 20.
Really? And there's a word for that, isn't there? When people bring back a language that they've never spoken?
Yes,
they've done those
that's
studies?
reincarnational research.
And somebody will start to speak German and they've never learned German?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Or this one instance of two twins speaking Aramaic, born in New York City, modern New York City. There is a little bit of Aramaic in the world, but it's only in remote Syrian villages. It's the language of Jesus. And these twins were speaking it in New York City, say they were 1 or 2 years of age as toddlers, and the language was identified by a Semitic scholar at Columbia University.
Astounding.
Yeah.
But I understand why your fellow professors and the world academics are thinking you may have lost it.
Yeah, well, I'm also no longer objective.
I see.
See, this is a very subjective art, supposedly. Now, of course, I wish they would remember that more and more we look at physics as nothing is objective.
And you're married to a professor in Germany.
Yeah.
What does he think about all of this?
I don't know why he married me. This guy is so courageous. Well, he read the first 600-page version, you know, the uncut version of this book for me, and put it down, threw it on the floor after 3 days of intense reading, and said, "This book has changed my life."
Really?
Yeah.
How interesting.
And so he's completely behind it.
Well, Dr. Larry Dossey, who I admire, he's a medical doctor, as you know. He wrote The Power of Prayer 20 years ago. You say he's writing a new book, and he suggests that if we could get there, lose our fear of death, the world would indeed be a different place.
Absolutely.
What about near-death experiences?
I think people who have them are a demonstration of what the human population could be like. This disinterest in competition, the authentic self coming forward again, the need for knowledge and to do service and to know what really matters, reverence for life, deep, undying certainty of a good universe, a good God, and life after death. And all these sorts of things converge to make a person into an ideal human, right?
Yes.
So, however, I think near-death experiences, as powerful as they are, do have some differences with permanent death experiences. It's just something I'm starting to really look at closely now.
What next for you? I know you're doing workshops and you're traveling and living in Austria and living in New York and seeing the world.
I'm going to go back into research. I'm working on a technical device that I have in my possession with a biophysicist in order to try to set up clinical trials to prove life after death.
That would be great.
Yeah, it would.
Because I'd like that proved before I die.
Well, you don't need it, Fanny. You've got the spirit.
But I'm
when
not
you go,
there
you're
yet.
going to just shoot out into the cosmos. You're going to be ablaze.
And
a
I
comet.
hope Richard Branson is there because I'm sure he'll have some kind of cosmic journey. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What a pleasure to meet you.
No, it was a great
Thank
pleasure
you.
to be here.
Well, even if people totally don't believe in this and are afraid of it, they must read this, The Last Frontier, Exploring the Afterlife and Transforming Our Fear of Death. Thank you. Dr. Julia Assante. And remember, you can join our conversations on YouTube or follow us on Twitter at Fanny Kiefer. There will be many more insightful, out-of-this-world guests to come. Thanks for watching Shaw TV and being with me today.